What is up everyone, Hero276 here, and welcome to today's video, and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got an unbelievably spicy one for you today. That's right, the spicy content is back. I'm running Magical Leaf Victreebel on the lead, Shadow Gyarados and Shadow Cloyster in the back. So definitely one of my spicier creations, and yes, Shadow Cloyster is back. And it will likely be the star of the show in today's video, as I've been seeing a ton of Gligar, and with the Shadow Cloyster having that ice and water subtyping, definitely makes it easier to deal with, especially when those ice shards hit for double super effective damage. Now, one change to the moveset on the Shadow Cloyster is I'm no longer running Hydro Pump. I'm also testing out Liquidation, which I ended up not using all too much, so might be worth it just to stick with Hydro Pump for the surprise nukes, but we'll see how that pans out in the battles. Before we dive into everything, I just want to give a special shout out to my Spotify page. If you're liking the music used in this video and other videos, please be sure to check out my Spotify page. You can buy my music for $4.99, or if you don't want to spend the money, totally fine. You can go check out the page and you can just follow it, and you'll be able to still access all the music that you use in this video and other videos. That being said, let's dive right into it. And we are starting today's video off with the lead, Shadow Victreebel leading into Pidgeot. This is absolutely terrible, so I'm going to send in the Shadow Gyarados, and my opponent is not switching out. Now, I decide not to throw right away, a bit of a misplay as I think they're going Feather Dance here. Feather Dance does connect, it is not enough to KO. Gyarados is quite frail, but luckily it can survive a Feather Dance. Gonna go for the Aqua Tail bait, that does end up grabbing the shield, and I get off a second Aqua Tail. This will get the Pidgeot quite low. The opponent lets it through, and unfortunately they do get the wing attack through, and down goes Gyarados. I'm going to send in the Cloyster. I get the Ice Shard through, so I am going to shield in case it is the Brave Bird. Opponent only ends up going for the Feather Dance. I switch in Victreebel to clear the debuff on the Cloyster, and I farm down. Bad news is my opponent has a second flyer in the back, but good news, it's something the Cloyster can handle. It's an Altaria. Now, Victreebel is dead weight here, so basically I'm just going to let it go, but I do end up making it to a Leaf Blade. Leaf Blade here is double resisted, but my opponent miscounts. They think it's another Sludge Bomb, and they commit the shield. Their final Pokemon is a Whiscash, and I see a very clear win con. All I need to do is exit with the double Avalanche, and I win the game. Mud Bomb, though, does a lot of damage, getting Cloyster into the yellow health, and I need to shield up this next Mud Bomb. I should still be able to make it to double Avalanche, and there it is, Avalanche number 1. Is this enough to KO the bulky Whiscash? Absolutely it is, and the Altaria can't do anything. Double super effective Avalanche coming through, picks up the knockout, and we take the win. Hopping into game number 2, picking up a very nice lead, Shadow Victreebel into Feraligatr. Opponent will be switching out of this matchup into a Cresselia, and I decide to respond with Gyarados. Now, Gyarados doesn't have a terrible matchup here, especially when they only farm up to the Grass Knot. Grass Knot, not going to be enough to KO, and this is not Psycho Cut down range either for the Gyarados. As well, Gyarados has access to the super effective Crunch. That does a lot of damage onto the Cresselia. Cresselia will be able to strike with one more Grass Knot, and I am going to decide to shield it up in order to preserve alignment. So down goes Cresselia. I do leave with residual energy as well for whatever decides to come back in. The opponent is waiting their clock. They send in Feraligatr, and I make it to a Crunch. This will get the Feraligatr quite low. I do decide to pivot back into the Victreebel, and I get the Magical Leaf Snipe as well. The opponent has Gligar in the back. Now, I do need shields down in order to win this game with the Cloyster, because Cloyster cannot take a hit, especially from the Shadow Gligar, which will be able to pick up a knockout or come very close to it with a dig. So I fire off 2 Leaf Blades, grab 2 shields. Switch timer is not up, so I have to let myself get farmed down and then wait my timer. Once that happens, though, I'll be sending in the Cloyster. These Ice Shards are doing so much damage. The opponent will make it to a move. I call the bait, and it's the Aerial Ace, and that's just game over. I could shield up this next move. The Ice Shard did go through. Cloyster farms down, and we take the win. Hopping into the next game, picking up a lead Victreebel into Registeel. This is a very tough lead for us because Registeel has play into the entire team. My opponent makes a switch into Mantine, and I do respond with the Shadow Gyarados. Shadow Gyarados can tank one Aerial Ace, albeit not that well, but we should still be able to get to a crunch before they're able to get to another charge move. I'm going to go for the crunch. Opponent decides to let that go through, and from here, I just cannot get the farm down. Mantine is able to survive the Dragon Breaths, but this will give me extra farm on the Victreebel once I send it back in. So I'm going to wait my switch clock, send back in the Victreebel, and get the snipe with the Magical Leaf. The opponent has Gligar in the back, and because I don't have the alignment that I need to win this game, this is honestly looking a little bit scary. I send in the Cloyster, the Ice Shard does go through, which is quite nice, and now they send in Registeel, so I'm going to go for the Liquidation. Liquidation honestly does respectable enough damage, though I am definitely missing the sheer power of Hydro Pump. Opponent will go for the Focus Blast, I am able to commit the shield, and now I'm going to go for another Liquidation. Liquidation, like I said, doing some solid damage to the Registeel, but they do end up shielding, which is quite nice for me. All I need to do is just shield this up. I should be able to KO the Registeel with a couple more Liquidations. The opponent ends up catching my Liquidation onto their Shadow Gligar, and even though this is only single effective as opposed to double super effective, it still does a lot of damage. I send in the Victreebel, my opponent surrenders, and that is game, set, and match. Hopping into game number 4, and we see the Gligar on the lead. I'm going to be switching out of this matchup into the Shadow Gyarados. My opponent will be switching out as well. They send in Frostlass, and this is very playable for the Gyarados. I'm going to go for the Crunch. My opponent does commit the shield, and we get the Defense Fall, which is really good. The opponent makes it to an Avalanche. I am going to respect it, as I do want to try and maintain alignment so I can get the Shadow Cloyster onto that Gligar. Gonna go for the Aqua Tail. Not going to try and farm down here. The opponent will shield it up. Frostlass makes it to another Avalanche, but of course I am going to commit the shield. And after I do so, Gyarados should be able to get the full Dragon Breath farm down, leaving with residual energy for whatever comes in. They send in Shadow Machamp, and this is going to get a little bit scary. Now, unfortunately, the Shadow Machamp hits quite hard with the Rock Slide. That nearly one-shots the Victreebel. I switch into Cloyster, but then my opponent simultaneously switches into the Gligar. I can survive a dig from this health range. The big question is, can I get the farm down? Cloyster gets the farm down, leaving with the Avalanche for the Shadow Machamp. This will crush the Shadow Machamp, and we take the win. Hopping into the next game, we see a fantastic lead into Shadow Whiscash. Honestly, the entire team does very well up against Shadow Whiscash. Opponent pivots into a Gligar, and we send in the Shadow Cloyster, and these Ice Shards absolutely tearing through. I do survive a dig because it is the regular, and I will be able to get the full Ice Shard farm down as well, leaving with a lot of stored energy for whatever decides to come back in, and it's gonna be the Whiscash. But this Avalanche does so much damage onto that Whiscash. I make no hesitation sending in my Victreebel. Victreebel not gonna be able to get the farm down, but that's okay. I still have shields to hide behind. I preserve my Victreebel for the Gyarados lurking in the back. Good to see my opponent running their own Gyarados. But unfortunately for my opponent, my Gyarados is going to be able to close up shop once I get both shields. So I'm going to go for the double Leaf Blade. I grab both shields, send in my own Gyarados, and from here all I need to do is just go for an Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail will put it into a range where we can Dragon Breath farm down, and we take the win. Now in this next battle, I want to show you what happens when you're running a spicy team and everything goes wrong. We immediately see a Core Breaker on the lead. This whole team really struggles up against Charge-a-Bug. I do at least get the free Magical Leaf, but I am going to shield as X-Scissor would do a tremendous amount of damage. I decide to go straight for the Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb would do a lot of damage. It is survivable, but my opponent commits the shield, rightly recognizing there is value with the Charge-a-Bug, so I'm going to double shield my Victreebel. I have no idea if this is X-Scissor range or not, so it's better to be safe than sorry, and I send forth another Sludge Bomb. Sludge Bomb, going to be grabbing another shield from my opponent, and unfortunately these Volt Switches put the Victreebel into X-Scissor range. I have to hope the Gyarados can get the full Dragon Breath farm down, but as you're going to see in a second, it's not going to get the full farm down. Two volt switches already put Gyarados below half health, and a discharge is enough to basically one-shot 2 full Gyarados. In comes Cloyster to get the farm down, but is Jellicent in the back. I'm fully walled, so I surrender the match. Looking to get right back on track in this next battle, picking up an excellent lead into Swampert. My opponent switches into Gligar, and we respond with the Shadow Cloyster. This time, because it is the Shadow, I will shield up to respect the dig. Unfortunately, they go for the Aerial Ace bait, not like it would have mattered. They're not getting to 2 moves either way, and we do get the full farm down. The opponent will be sending back in that Swampert, gonna go for the Avalanche. Avalanche is gonna do a lot of damage onto the Swampert, and another Ice Shard puts it in the red. I make it to the Liquidation. The opponent makes it to a charge move, just the Hydro Cannon, but I am able to get off the Liquidation. I decide to Zero Bubble it just in case they shield it up, which my opponent actually lets it go through. I was hoping to get an undercharge. It's Skarmory in the back. Unfortunately, Gyarados, which is my Skarmory counter, is down a shield, but I do make a nice catch, catching the Sky Attack onto the Victory Ball and basically sacking it. My opponent is now basically energy dry. Gyarados comes back in, and hopefully we have enough energy to win this game. Gonna go for the Aqua Tail. Aqua Tail is gonna grab the first shield from the Skarmory, and it was a CMP tie. Gonna shield up. My opponent goes for the Sky Attack. I just need to make it to the back-to-back Aqua Tails. Gyarados farming up, and it's basically right there. Gonna go for the first Aqua Tail. This next Aqua Tail is on a CMP tie. It has to KO if we're gonna win the game. Aqua Tail KOs the Skarmory, and we take the win. Hopping into the next one, we see a pretty terrible lead into Shadow Dragonair, but I have 2 good responses to Shadow Dragonair in the back. I send in the Shadow Gyarados, the opponent pivots out of the matchup, and they send in a Whiscash, and this is by no means a response to Gyarados. The opponent also only farms up 5, so this is only enough for the Mud Bomb. A very safe no shield for me. I'm going to go for the Crunch. Crunch is going to do some very solid damage onto that Whiscash, and we do see the defense fall. Whiscash is going to fire off the Scald, but this is not Scald range for the Gyarados. We do not get the attack fall, and we farm down. The opponent is going to wait their switch clock. They decide to send back in the Dragonair, and I have the Crunch ready to go. Crunch would do a lot of damage, so my opponent does commit the shield, and now Cloyster has a shield advantage. Their final Pokemon is Mantine. I send in the Victory Ball, and at this point, I see a win condition. And that win condition is energy on the Shadow Cloyster. In order to do so though, I'm going to have to get the final shield from the Mantine, so I full send the Sludge Bomb, the opponent commits the shield, and I am in business. They're gonna make another Aerial Ace, time to let the Victory Ball go down, and let the spotlight fall on the Shadow Cloyster. In comes the Shadow Cloyster. I'm farming up a ton of energy, and now I just no-shield the Aerial Ace because I'm not in Aerial Ace range. That still does a ton of damage though. It is my understanding that the Dragonair does have some residual energy, so I do decide to throw this Avalanche just before the Mantine reaches their second Aerial Ace. They send back in the Dragonair. I'm able to get off another Avalanche, and this will KO the Shadow Dragonair, and we take the win. New game, same leads. Victory Ball leading into Shadow Dragonair. I will pivot out of this matchup into the Shadow Gyarados. The opponent is staying in. Perhaps they're weak to Shadow Gyarados somewhere in the back, so I will be shielding up the Shadow Gyarados and looking for the full Dragon Breath farm down. Gyarados is able to get it. Opponent sends in Altaria, and Shadow Gyarados is putting in some absolute work in the back. Gonna go for the Crunch. Opponent lets that through. Time to send in Cloyster, looking for the farm down. We don't get it. I will burn the second shield. The opponent goes for the Sky Attack. What's in back? It's Goodra, so it's triple Dragon, extreme spice for my opponent. I'm going to go for the Avalanche to get the first shield for my opponent. I farm up 1, bank the Avalanche for later, and send in the Victory Ball looking for a catch, but I'm unable to get it. The opponent will go for the Aqua Tail. That's going to be resisted. I just need to make it to another charge move to force the second shield for my opponent. Because they are in Leaf Blade range, that's the move I will be going for. And by reaching this Leaf Blade, this should essentially spell game over. Gonna go for the Leaf Blade. Opponent shields it up. I have the Avalanche banked. I accidentally overtap, but thank goodness my opponent was not at a charge move. I'm able to make it to the Avalanche to take out the Goodra and take the win. We have one more battle for you today, picking up a lead, Victreebel into Mandibuzz. This is not such a great lead for the Victreebel. I will be sending in the Shadow Gyarados, but this is honestly not great either, as Gyarados is severely outbulked in this matchup. I am going to call the Aerial Ace. It is just the Aerial Ace. The opponent now switches out of this matchup, and they send in a Whiscash. Not a Gyarados response whatsoever. I go for the Crunch. The opponent will be going for a Charge move. Gyarados is in Scald range, so I will be letting this through. From here, the game plan's quite simple. I'm going to wait my switch clock, and I'm going to send in the Victreebel, looking for the Magical Leaf Farm down, and I'm able to get it, which is very nice. Opponent sends back in the Mandibuzz, I bank the Sludge Bomb for later, and I send in the Cloyster. Shadow Cloyster, very glassy, going to shield up the potential Dark Pulse. It is the Dark Pulse. The opponent switches into Vigoroth, and this looks really tough. Gonna go for the Avalanche. Avalanche is gonna grab the shield from my opponent. I am able to make it to another Avalanche. Opponent can just shield this up, and they will be able to counter down, but my opponent lets it through! And suddenly, there's life. I can just let the move go through. I'm going to send in the Victreebel, and can Victreebel KO a Mandibuzz? Body Slam does do less than an Aerial Ace, so I will let that go through. And now, it's time. Can Victreebel do the impossible? I shield up. It's the Aerial Ace. Victreebel has the back-to-back Sludge Bombs. Gonna go for the first Sludge Bomb. That's gonna grab the shield, and we make it to the second on the CMP tie. This has to KO. It KOs, and Victreebel takes out a Mandibuzz for the win. If you're wondering how I performed with the team, the answer is actually quite surprising. Out of 20 battles, I won 10 of them, so I was actually able to break even on the day. This is not a team I would recommend for climbing in any capacity, but it was super fun. Now, I also sent some of these battles over to Home Slice Henry, so hopefully he'll cover those on his channel. I'll leave a link in the description if he does. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.